The afternoon sun was gentle and the streets of the neighborhood were quiet. Birds chirped in the distance and a soft breeze moved the leaves on the trees. He was walking home from school just like any other day, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He had plans to finish his homework, maybe watch a little TV and relax before dinner. There was nothing unusual about the day, or so he thought. He walked with a steady pace, headphones in, music playing softly. People on the sidewalk smiled at him as he passed. A few waved. It felt ordinary, safe. But that sense of normalcy disappeared in a heartbeat. Around the corner he noticed a police car slowly rolling by. The car stopped and two officers stepped out. They didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't ask how he was. They walked straight toward him, eyes sharp and serious. "Hey, kid. You got a minute?" one of them said. His voice was rough and it made his stomach tighten. He took off his headphones, unsure what to say. Yes, officer. How can I help you?" His voice was calm, though he felt nervous. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them pointed at him almost accusingly. "We got a report about someone acting suspicious around here. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" He shook his head. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I'm just walking home from school." They didn't respond immediately. Instead, they stepped closer. One of the officers reached toward his backpack, trying to grab it. He instinctively moved back. "Hey, don't touch me," he said. The officer ignored him and pulled the backpack down roughly, searching through it. Books, papers, and a water bottle spilled onto the sidewalk. People started to gather, whispering to each other. A neighbor came out from their porch, watching silently. Some pulled out their phones. The teen's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't understand why this was happening. He had done nothing wrong, yet these men were treating him like a criminal. "Why are you being so rough?" "I haven't done anything," he exclaimed. His voice trembled, not out of weakness, but out of fear and confusion. The officer's expressions hardened. "Just stay calm, kid," one said, his tone low and controlled. But the way he moved, the way he grabbed at the teen's arms, made it clear that calmness was the last thing on the teen's mind. A few other people on the street were watching closely now. Some shook their heads, muttering under their breath. Others held up their phones, recording every moment. The teen felt trapped, surrounded, and powerless. His legs were stiff and his hands shook. He kept repeating that he hadn't done anything, hoping that they would understand. But it felt like his words didn't matter. The situation escalated quickly. One officer grabbed his wrist roughly, twisting it behind his back. Pain shot through his arm and he winced. He tried to explain again. "I'm not resisting." "Please, I haven't done anything." The officer ignored him, pressing harder. The teen stumbled slightly, trying to keep his balance. The other officer crouched down, looking into his face with a mixture of suspicion and impatience. "You think you're smart, huh? You think we're gonna let you just walk away?" No, I don't, please." "I'm just walking home." The words spilled out, rushed and frantic. His mind raced. How could this be happening? He had followed every rule, been polite, respectful, and careful. And now, here he was in the middle of the sidewalk being treated like a criminal for no reason. The officers didn't seem to hear him. One of them shoved him against the hood of their car. The cold metal pressed against his chest. He tried to steady himself, but the force of the shove made him stumble. His backpack fell to the ground again, spilling papers and books. The officer bent down and kicked it slightly as if to make a point. A few neighbors gasped. Some whispered to each other. One older woman shook her head, muttering, "This isn't right." The teen felt his heart sink. He wanted someone to step in to tell them they were wrong, but nobody moved fast enough. He felt isolated, alone, and afraid. The officer holding him pressed his hand harder against his back. "Hands behind your back now." He obeyed, twisting his wrists painfully. The metal cuffs dug into his skin as the officer locked them in place. Every second felt like an eternity. His breathing became shallow, rapid. He wanted to scream, to tell them again and again that he had done nothing, but his voice felt small against their authority. People around them murmured, some filming, some looking on silently. The teen could see the fear in their eyes too, not just his own fear, but the fear of everyone who was watching. It wasn't just about him. It was about what they were witnessing. And yet, despite the eyes on them, the officers didn't stop. He tried to speak again, voice barely audible. "Please. I haven't done anything. Please check. You'll see." One officer leaned in, his face inches from his. Save it, just stay quiet. You're in enough trouble as it is. The teen felt a wave of panic. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he could get out of this situation. He had never been in trouble with the police before. He didn't have experience with this. He was just a kid trying to walk home from school, and now his whole day, maybe more, was ruined. He thought about calling someone, anyone, but he was handcuffed. His backpack was on the ground, out of reach. Then he remembered. His father, of course. His father was an important person. He knew how to handle situations like this. He had the authority, the knowledge, the connections. Maybe, just maybe, he could fix this. He cleared his throat, trying to get the officer's attention without sounding rude. I need to make a call. My dad? The officers looked at each other, skeptical. Your dad? Who's that? One of them asked, a trace of impatience in his voice. My dad. He can help here. Please let me call him, the teen said, trying to keep his voice steady. His heart pounded. Every second felt like hours. He knew that if they didn't let him call, he could be stuck in this situation much longer. After a tense moment, one officer muttered, Fine. One call. But make it quick. He nodded, relief flooding through him. He pulled out his phone as best as he could, fingers shaking. He dialed quickly, hoping his father would pick up immediately. The phone rang twice. 3 times. Then he heard his father's calm, deep voice on the line. Hello? Dad? It's me. I'm in trouble. The police, they won't listen to me. I haven't done anything. His voice trembled, the words tumbling out. His father's voice was firm but soothing. Stay calm. I'm here. Tell me exactly what's happening. He quickly explained everything, the officers listening nearby, watching the conversation with wary expressions. His father asked questions, clarified, and then spoke directly to the officers. This is my son. I'm aware of the situation. I expect this matter to be handled properly. There will be consequences for misconduct. The teen could feel the change immediately. The officers shifted their stance. Their faces hardened for a moment, then softened slightly. The authority in his father's voice was undeniable. They realized this was not a routine situation. People watching the scene on the street whispered to each other. Some looked at the officers, their expressions a mix of disbelief and relief. The teen felt a flicker of hope. Maybe now, just maybe, things would start to get better. Even though his heart was still pounding, even though his hands were still sore from the cuffs, he felt a sense of reassurance. His father's presence on the phone had given him strength. It had reminded him that he was not powerless, that he could protect himself in some way, and that he had someone watching out for him. The officers were quiet for a moment, their earlier aggression fading. The crowd around them continued to watch, cameras still rolling, whispers spreading. The teen took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, trying to feel some sense of control again. The day had turned upside down in just a few minutes, but he realized he had a lifeline. Even in the middle of fear, pain, and confusion, he felt a small but powerful sense of relief. He wasn't alone. He wasn't powerless, and maybe, just maybe, things could start to turn around. He looked at the people watching, the neighbors, the recording phones, and felt a strange mix of fear and courage. Fear because he had been treated unfairly. Courage because he had stood his ground and had the strength to reach out for help when he needed it most. The afternoon sun still shone down, the birds still chirped, and the breeze still moved the leaves. But now the street felt different. Something had shifted. The fear was still there, but it was joined by hope. The hope that justice, fairness, and reason could still prevail, even in the most frightening moments. And with that, he knew the rest of the story was about to unfold. One call at a time, one moment at a time. The moment he finished explaining the situation to his father, he could feel a shift in the air. The officers, who had been so aggressive just moments ago, now seemed cautious. They exchanged quick, uneasy glances, their earlier confidence replaced with hesitation. The teen felt a flicker of hope, but he was still wary. He had seen anger and authority in their eyes, and he knew that fear could return at any moment. Stay calm. Keep your hands where they are. Don't argue, don't resist, his father's voice said firmly through the phone. I'm here and I am watching. Everything you do will be recorded, and every action will have consequences if handled poorly. He nodded, although the officers couldn't see him. His heart was still racing, but the tension in his chest eased just slightly. For the first time, he felt that someone was truly on his side. He took a shaky breath and tried to focus. The phone call wasn't just a lifeline. It was a shield. One officer finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "Sir, he's just a kid. We were just questioning him." The words sounded less like authority and more like an attempt to justify what had already happened. The teen listened closely. He could tell that his father was not going to let excuses slide. "I expect proper conduct," his father replied without raising his voice, but with unmistakable authority. "Do not escalate this further. He is a minor, and he has the right to be treated fairly. Any misconduct will be reported immediately." The teen glanced around. People on the street were still watching, their whispers growing louder as they sensed a change. Some had been silently recording, others just observing, but everyone seemed aware that this was no longer a routine encounter. The teen felt a strange mix of fear and courage. Fear, because he was still restrained and unsure what would happen next. Courage, because he knew he had power in the form of his father's position and voice. The officer holding his arm shifted uncomfortably. The other officer scratched the back of his neck. For a moment it was silent except for the soft hum of the traffic nearby, and the distant sound of children playing a few blocks away. The teen could feel the tension, thick and heavy, but different now. It wasn't just threat anymore. It was uncertainty. "All right," the first officer muttered finally, his tone careful. We'll let him go if everything checks out." The teen felt a rush of relief. Not complete relief, he was still handcuffed, still pressed against the police car, but it was progress. It was a sign that the phone call had made a difference. His father's authority, calm and commanding, had shifted the balance of power. "Do not release him until I am there," his father said firmly. "I want a full report of what happened. If there are any complaints or issues, I expect them documented and addressed. You understand?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied, now visibly nervous. The way he said it made it clear he was taking the instructions seriously. The teen breathed a little easier. For the first time in what felt like hours, he could think clearly. He looked at the crowd around him. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity, concern, and amazement. Some whispered, "Did you see that? He's making the cops nervous." Others shook their heads, still recording on their phones. He realized how much attention this small street corner had drawn, and how the presence of witnesses could also change the way the officers behaved. His father continued talking, now directly to the officers. He asked them to explain exactly why they had stopped his son, to recount the suspicious activity they claimed to have witnessed. He requested full transparency and reminded them that this incident would be reviewed carefully. The officers fumbled with their words, giving vague answers, realizing that every lie or excuse could now be exposed. The teen could feel the tension shift further. The officers were no longer in control. They were aware of scrutiny, aware of accountability. The presence of his father on the line had turned what had been an overwhelming situation into a negotiation of sorts, where the teen had a voice indirectly through his father's authority. Meanwhile, the teen's body was still tense. His wrists ached from the handcuffs, his arms were sore from being grabbed roughly, and the adrenaline still coursed through his veins. Every small movement hurt, but he forced himself to stay calm. His father's voice reminded him to breathe slowly, to stay steady, to not make any sudden movements that could be misinterpreted. He looked around at the street, noticing details he hadn't before: the cracks in the sidewalk, the chipped paint on the nearby houses, the way the sun reflected off a car window. Focusing on small, ordinary details helped distract him from the fear, even if just a little. He felt grounded, like he could endure whatever was coming next. After a few moments, one officer reluctantly reached for his keys. "We'll loosen the cuffs," he said quietly, almost apologetically. The teen's heart leapt. Slowly, carefully, the metal cuffs were removed. Relief surged through him, but he didn't move too quickly. He had learned already that sudden movements could make the situation worse. He remained calm, following his father's instructions. Once free, he rubbed his wrists, feeling the faint marks and soreness left by the tight handcuffs. It stung, but it also reminded him that he had survived this moment. He had endured fear, confusion, and aggression, and he had come out the other side. For the first time, he allowed himself a small sense of triumph. His father's voice remained steady, ensuring that the officers didn't make any sudden decisions. He spoke calmly but firmly about the seriousness of the incident, about the responsibilities of those in uniform, and about the importance of treating young people with respect and fairness. The teen realized that his father's words weren't just powerful because of his title. They were powerful because they carried experience, authority, and a commitment to justice. The officers, still visibly tense, nodded and murmured compliance. They knew that any misstep now could have serious consequences. The teen felt the shift in the atmosphere, the difference between fear and safety. He could finally think about what had happened, about how quickly an ordinary day had turned into a nightmare, and how one phone call had changed everything. People on the street continued to watch. Some whispered congratulations, others murmured relief. The teen felt their presence as both a comfort and a reminder that injustice could happen anywhere, in front of anyone. He understood that he had been lucky, that his father's position had provided protection that many others might not have. It was a sobering thought, one that reminded him of both privilege and responsibility. The officers now stepped back, no longer pressing him, no longer shoving or threatening. The teen felt a wave of relief wash over him. His body slowly relaxed, though the soreness and tension remained. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened. His father stayed on the line, guiding him through the next steps. He reminded him to stay composed, to answer any questions carefully, and to make note of what had occurred. The teen listened, realizing that even after the immediate danger had passed, there were still things to be done to ensure accountability and fairness. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel safe. The fear was still there, faint but lingering, a reminder of how quickly life could change. But alongside it was a new feeling, a sense of empowerment. He realized that courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was also about knowing when to ask for help, when to stand your ground, and when to trust those who had the power to protect you. The sun was still shining, the street still busy with whispers and quiet movements. The teen walked a few steps away from the officers, feeling lighter with each step. The crowd watched, still recording, still whispering, but he no longer felt trapped. He had survived, he had been heard, and he had made it through one of the scariest moments of his life. And as he looked back at the officers, standing silently by their car, he knew that this encounter would not be forgotten. The story of the afternoon, the fear, the courage, and the one phone call would stay with him forever. It was a lesson in power, in justice, and in the importance of using every resource you have when faced with injustice. The teen's father remained on the line until he was safely home, ensuring that the officers left without further incident and that the situation was properly documented. The teen felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his father's authority, but for the presence, guidance, and calm that had helped him through an incredibly difficult experience. By the time he hung up the phone, the sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. He took a final deep breath, feeling the tension slowly melt from his shoulders. He was bruised, sore, and shaken, but he was safe. And for the first time since the encounter began, he allowed himself to truly exhale. He knew this day would change him. It would stay with him forever. But he also knew that he had survived, that he had stood strong even when he felt powerless, and that he had the support he needed to face whatever came next. And with that, the street seemed a little calmer, the sun a little warmer, and the world a little more just than it had an hour ago. After the teen's father spoke on the phone, the change in the atmosphere was immediate. The officers who had been so aggressive before were now more cautious, shifting their weight from one foot to the other, glancing at each other as if silently questioning their actions. The teen could feel it too, a tension in the air, not the kind that comes from fear anymore, but the kind that comes from uncertainty and being watched. His father's voice continued to guide him over the phone. Stay calm, keep your head up, and answer clearly if anyone speaks to you. Do not argue. Do not resist. I am watching everything. The teen nodded, though the officers could not see him. It helped him focus. Each word from his father reminded him that he was not powerless, that there was someone on his side who had the authority to intervene. The officers now hesitated, glancing at the teen, then at the crowd that had gathered. People were watching closely, some recording with their phones, others whispering to each other. The teen realized how different this moment was from just a few minutes ago. Before, he had been alone, facing aggression and injustice, unsure if anyone would see or care. Now, with witnesses and his father's voice lending authority, the officers seemed aware that any wrong move could be noticed and have consequences. One officer finally spoke, But the tone was different this time. It was quieter, almost hesitant. "Sir, we were just following protocol. We didn't mean—" "Protocol does not give you the right to assault a minor," his father said firmly, cutting him off. "I want a detailed account of what led to this situation. I expect your full names, badge numbers, and statements to be recorded. Any failure to provide accurate information will be documented as misconduct." The teen could feel the change in the officer's stance. Their postures shifted, shoulders stiffening as if bracing themselves. He could see that they were suddenly aware of the seriousness of the moment. The crowd, sensing the tension, murmured among themselves. Whispers of disbelief and curiosity spread. "Did you hear that? The kid's dad is making them nervous." Wow, they didn't expect this. The teen's mind was still racing, but he took a slow, deep breath as instructed. He tried to steady his heartbeat to keep his movements minimal. His body was sore from the earlier struggle, his wrists still tender, his arms aching where they had been grabbed roughly. But he knew now that the danger had shifted. He wasn't entirely safe yet, but he had leverage, and that gave him strength. His father continued to speak to the officers, asking questions and clarifying details. "Tell me exactly what led you to detain my son, what observations were made, and by whom." The officers exchanged looks again, fumbling slightly. The authority in his father's voice left no room for excuses or lies. They realized that their actions were being scrutinized at the highest level, and there was no escaping accountability. The teen watched this silently, almost in awe. He could see how much power one phone call had. In minutes, a situation that had felt hopeless had turned. He could still feel the fear lingering in his chest, but it was accompanied by a new sense of hope and empowerment. He realized how quickly circumstances could change when someone with authority intervenes on your behalf. Nearby, some neighbors whispered to each other, glancing nervously at the officers. Some continued recording, their phones capturing every word and movement. The teen noticed one woman in particular, an older neighbor who had been watching quietly, giving him a small, reassuring smile. It was a reminder that even in moments of fear and injustice, people were paying attention, and that observation mattered. The first officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we saw someone acting suspicious near the store. That's why we approached him." His voice lacked confidence now. We didn't touch him until he seemed—" "Suspicious behavior does not justify aggression or assault," his father interrupted firmly. "He is a minor. He is walking home from school. You had no right to use force unless there was immediate danger, which there was not. Your conduct will be reviewed." The teen felt a rush of relief. He could feel the power in his father's words, the way they commanded attention and respect. He also felt gratitude that he had someone who could protect him in ways he could not protect himself. The fear was still there, but now it was tempered by security and validation. The officers began to step back slightly, their hands no longer reaching toward him. Their posture softened, though caution remained. One officer muttered something about following procedures, while the other fidgeted with his notebook, trying to make sure every detail would be documented properly. The teen could feel the subtle but important difference between before and now. He noticed the crowd shifting too. Some people exchanged glances, surprised at the rapid change in the dynamic. The teen realized that public scrutiny was as much a factor as his father's authority. The combination of witnesses and the authoritative call had completely altered the situation. He felt a growing awareness of how power, responsibility, and presence could intersect in moments of crisis. His father spoke again, calmly but firmly. "I expect a full written account of this incident. I expect all necessary steps to be taken to prevent something like this from happening again. And I expect confirmation that my son is safe and unharmed before you leave the scene." The teen could feel the tension in the officers' bodies. They nodded quickly, acknowledging the instructions. There was no aggression left in their movements, only compliance and cautious awareness. The teen finally allowed himself to relax slightly. He rubbed his wrists gently, still sore from the earlier handcuffs, feeling a small sense of physical relief as well as emotional relief. He could see that the officers were now aware that their behavior had been unacceptable, and that there were serious consequences for misconduct. The teen felt a flicker of pride. He had endured, and he had made it through the frightening ordeal. The presence of his father, calm, authoritative, and protective, had made all the difference. For a moment, the teen looked at the street around him. The sun was still bright, casting soft shadows, and the neighborhood seemed ordinary again, almost as if nothing had happened. But he knew that everything had changed. The day that had begun like any other had become a moment he would never forget. It had taught him about fear, resilience, and the power of intervention. His father's voice remained steady on the phone, guiding him through the next steps. He reminded him to stay calm, to answer questions truthfully, and to observe everything carefully. Document what happened. Note times, actions, and words. You will need this for any follow-up. Be precise and clear. Do not argue or resist, but do not let anything go unrecorded. The teen nodded, mentally noting each instruction. The officers had pulled out a notebook and were beginning to write down statements, clearly aware that every word would be reviewed. He felt a mixture of relief and amazement. Just minutes ago, he had been overwhelmed and powerless. Now he was witnessing accountability in action, learning that even those in positions of authority could be held responsible if someone took the right steps. The crowd continued to watch, some whispering quietly, others clearly relieved that the situation was resolving peacefully. The teen noticed that some people were sharing the story on their phones, messaging friends and neighbors. He realized that the story of this encounter would spread, and that the presence of witnesses was another layer of protection. He could feel the last remnants of fear melting into cautious confidence. His father was on the line, speaking calmly but firmly, and the officers were complying. It was a moment of transition, from fear and helplessness to oversight and accountability. He realized that courage didn't just mean facing danger. It also meant seeking help, using resources wisely, and staying calm under pressure. One of the officers finally looked at him and said quietly, You can leave now. Just, please be careful." His tone lacked the aggression it had held before. The other officer nodded in agreement, still writing in his notebook. The teen took a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He still felt sore and shaken, but he knew he had survived the most dangerous part of the encounter. He had been threatened, restrained, and harassed, yet he had maintained his composure and made the one call that changed everything. It was a lesson in patience, courage, and strategy, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. His father remained on the line, reminding him to be careful as he walked away, ensuring that he got home safely. The teen looked back one last time at the officers, noticing their subdued expressions, the careful attention they were now paying to protocol. It was clear that the encounter had left an impression on them as well. The teen took a few steps down the street, the weight of the afternoon slowly lifting from his shoulders. He felt the soreness in his wrists and arms, the lingering adrenaline, and the emotional exhaustion, but he also felt a sense of empowerment. He had faced fear, injustice, and aggression, and he had survived. He had learned the importance of intervention, the power of authority, and the value of calm courage in the face of crisis. As he continued walking, the street returning to its quiet, ordinary rhythm, he realized that life could change in an instant. Fear and safety were often only a few moments apart, but he also understood that courage, preparation, and the presence of someone who cared could shift the balance dramatically. He looked around at the neighborhood, at the people who had watched silently or recorded the event, and he felt gratitude, not just for his father, but for the awareness and attention of others. He realized that even ordinary moments could carry witnesses, and that the world could sometimes intervene in unexpected ways to protect those who needed it most. And as he walked home, the sun casting long shadows across the pavement, he carried with him a new sense of resilience, a deeper understanding of justice, and a quiet confidence that he could face challenges, even when they seemed insurmountable. The teen finally stepped away from the officers, his legs shaking slightly from adrenaline and fear. The soreness in his wrists and arms reminded him of how close the situation had come to being much worse. His father was still on the phone, his calm voice steady and reassuring. "Keep walking slowly. Don't stop until you're safely home. Don't engage anyone else on the street. I'll stay with you until you're inside." The teen nodded, even though his father couldn't see him. Every step felt heavier than usual, not just from the physical exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of what had just happened. He had walked these streets countless times before, but today every corner, every shadow, every passerby seemed different. The ordinary world felt more fragile, more unpredictable. As he moved down the sidewalk, people who had been watching began to disperse, murmuring quietly among themselves. Some had been recording the incident, capturing the tense moments on their phones. The teen felt a strange mix of relief and embarrassment at being the center of so much attention. He was grateful that people had witnessed what had happened, but he wished it had never occurred at all. His father's voice cut through his thoughts. "Did you notice everything that happened? The officers' behavior, the way they treated you? You need to remember details for later. Write them down when you get home." The teen tried to focus, replaying the moments in his head. He remembered the initial approach, the rough handling, the moment when his backpack was yanked to the ground. He remembered the fear that had gripped him when he was handcuffed, the pain of the cuffs pressing into his wrists and the uncertainty that filled every second while the officers spoke over him. Every detail was now important. He glanced back briefly, seeing the officers still standing by their car, their postures cautious and tense. The crowd had thinned, but a few people remained, observing quietly. The teen realized that this encounter would not be forgotten, not by him, not by the officers, and not by those who had witnessed it. As he continued walking, his father guided him through what to do next. "Once you get inside, lock the door. Take a few deep breaths. Then write everything down, times, actions, words, and who was present. This will be important for any follow-up. Keep your phone nearby in case I need to call you back." The teen followed each instruction carefully. He felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, but it wasn't a burden. It was a reminder that he had survived, that he had a role to play in ensuring the situation was addressed properly. He had been powerless at first, but now he had agency, and that made him feel stronger. When he reached his front door, he unlocked it with trembling hands and stepped inside. The familiar scent of home was comforting, the faint smell of dinner cooking, the sound of a distant TV, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax fully, leaning against the door and closing his eyes. He had made it through the worst of it, and the safety of his home wrapped around him like a shield. He followed his father's instructions, sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He began to write down everything that had happened, starting with the moment he left school and continuing through every step of the encounter. He wrote about the officer's approach, the rough handling of his backpack, the handcuffs, and the fear that had gripped him. He wrote about the crowd that had gathered and how witnesses had quietly observed. Most importantly, he wrote about the phone call to his father and how it had changed the situation. Writing down the events helped him process what had happened. He realized that his fear had been intense, but it had not broken him. He had stayed calm when it mattered most, and he had taken action that ensured his safety. That knowledge gave him a quiet sense of pride, even amidst the lingering discomfort of the afternoon's ordeal. After he finished writing, his father called back, checking in to make sure he was okay. "How are you feeling now?" his father asked gently. "I'm okay," he said honestly. "Still sore, but safer. I think I'm fine now." "Good, I'm proud of you," his father said, his tone warm but serious. "You handled yourself well under pressure, but we need to make sure this is followed up properly. I'll be reviewing the officer's actions, and I'll make sure that steps are taken so this doesn't happen again. You did the right thing by staying calm and calling me." The teen felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He had feared that no one would believe him or that the situation would be dismissed, but his father's presence had ensured accountability. He realized how important it was to have someone who could advocate for him, someone who could provide protection when he could not. Over the next few hours, the teen and his father discussed the incident in detail. They reviewed the officer's conduct, the timeline of events, and the steps that would need to be taken to ensure proper accountability. The teen learned about the importance of documentation, of witness statements, and of legal oversight. His father explained that every action taken by the officers would be reviewed, and that there would be consequences if any misconduct was confirmed. The teen listened carefully, absorbing each detail. He realized that what had happened to him could happen to others, and that it was important to take responsibility not only for his own safety, but also for helping to prevent similar situations in the future. The weight of responsibility was real, but it was empowering. He understood that courage and action could create change, even in moments that felt overwhelming and frightening. Later that evening after dinner, the teen reflected on the day's events. He thought about the fear that had gripped him on the sidewalk, the physical pain from being handled roughly, and the uncertainty that had filled every second. But he also thought about the power of one phone call, the calm authority of his father, and the shift in the officer's behavior once accountability was introduced. It was a lesson he would never forget. That fear could be countered with courage, that authority could protect, and that witnessing and documenting injustice mattered. He also thought about the crowd, the neighbors who had watched and the people who had recorded the incident. Their presence had added another layer of protection. He realized that even ordinary bystanders could play a role in ensuring fairness and accountability. It was a reminder that communities were stronger when people paid attention and acted responsibly. As the night deepened, he began to feel a sense of closure. The immediate danger had passed. The physical threat was over, and he was safe at home. The officers had been reminded of their responsibility, and the next steps would ensure that the situation was addressed formally. The teen felt a sense of empowerment mixed with relief, a feeling that he had not experienced before in such intensity. Before going to bed, he took a few minutes to write down his feelings, separate from the factual account of the incident. He wrote about his fear, his confusion, his pain, and his sense of isolation during the encounter. He wrote about the relief, the hope, and the quiet pride that had come from taking action and relying on the support of someone he trusted. Writing it down helped him process the emotions, giving him a sense of control over a day that had felt completely out of control. As he lay in bed, he thought about the lessons he had learned. Fear could be overwhelming, but it did not have to be permanent. Courage could be quiet and strategic, not just loud and physical. Authority could be protective, and accountability could change the course of events in ways that seemed almost magical in their impact. He realized that his perspective on safety, justice, and trust had deepened in just a few hours. Even as sleep approached, he knew that the events of the day would stay with him. He would remember the fear, the tension, the pain, but also the relief, the guidance, and the empowerment. He would remember how one call to the right person, at the right time, had shifted the balance of power and ensured his safety. It was a lesson that he would carry into the future, not just as a memory of fear, but as a guide for how to navigate challenges with composure and courage. The next morning, he awoke feeling sore but stronger. The bruises on his wrists reminded him of the danger he had faced, but they also reminded him of his resilience. He prepared for school, aware that life would continue, that the streets would return to their ordinary rhythm, but also aware that his understanding of the world had changed forever. He had learned about the power of accountability, the importance of witnesses, and the value of measured courage. As he walked to school that day, he noticed the streets differently. He noticed people watching, children playing, and neighbors talking. He felt a heightened awareness of the world around him and the subtle ways in which people and actions could influence outcomes. He carried himself with a new sense of confidence, not arrogance, but quiet assurance that he could navigate challenges and protect himself when needed. The incident had changed him, but it had also strengthened him. He realized that fear was temporary, but knowledge, preparation, and courage were lasting. He had faced injustice and survived. He had seen the power of intervention and authority, and he had experienced the impact of accountability firsthand. And as he continued down the familiar streets, he carried with him not just the memory of fear and pain, but a newfound sense of resilience, hope, and understanding. The day had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. He had learned that even in moments of great fear, there was a way to reclaim control, to protect oneself, and to ensure that justice could be served. The teen knew that the journey was not over, that there would be follow-up, investigations, and further discussions, but he felt ready. He had survived the most immediate danger, and he was prepared to see the situation through to its conclusion. He had learned that courage, strategy, and support could turn even the most frightening experiences into lessons in strength and resilience. By the end of the day, he felt a sense of closure and preparation for what was next. He knew he was safe. He knew the officers would face scrutiny, and he knew that he had done everything possible to protect himself. The lessons of the day were clear. Fear could be confronted, courage could be measured, and justice could be sought, even when circumstances seemed overwhelming. The next few days passed slowly but steadily. The teen returned to school, carrying a new awareness of the world around him. He noticed things he hadn't before, the way people looked at him on the street, the subtle shifts in attention when he passed, the faint awareness that the world could sometimes be unfair, even when you had done nothing wrong. But alongside that awareness came a new sense of confidence. He had faced fear and he had survived. He had seen the power of intervention, the impact of authority, and the importance of courage. At school, he noticed that some of his classmates had heard about the incident. A few whispered to each other when he walked by, their eyes wide with curiosity. He didn't mind. He knew that what had happened was not something to be ashamed of. It was a moment that had tested him and shown him his own resilience. Some classmates approached him quietly, asking if he was okay, and he nodded, giving them a small smile. The support, however small, felt comforting. Back at home, his father continued to guide him through the aftermath. They reviewed the events in detail again, going over notes, witness statements, and videos from neighbors. His father explained that every piece of evidence would be important in ensuring accountability. He talked about the responsibility of those in uniform, the importance of fairness, and the ways in which the system could correct itself when mistakes or misconduct occurred. The teen listened attentively. He understood now that the situation was bigger than just him. It was about fairness, justice, and making sure that the same thing didn't happen to someone else. His father reminded him that his actions, staying calm, calling for help, documenting everything, had set an example for how to handle difficult situations. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. As the days passed, the officers involved were summoned for formal reviews. Statements were taken and their actions were scrutinized carefully. The teen's detailed notes and the recordings from bystanders became key pieces of evidence. He was amazed at how much difference a few simple, careful actions could make. His courage in staying calm, his father's intervention, and the witness's presence had all combined to ensure that the truth could be seen clearly. He felt a quiet satisfaction as he watched the process unfold. The officers who had treated him roughly were held accountable. They had to explain their behavior, acknowledge their mistakes, and take steps to prevent such incidents in the future. The teen realized that justice wasn't always immediate, but with persistence, clarity, and courage, it could be achieved. The experience also had a deep effect on his perspective. He became more aware of the world, of the small and large ways in which people could be treated unfairly, and of the importance of standing up for oneself and others. He understood now that courage could take many forms: staying calm under pressure, seeking help when needed, documenting events, and speaking the truth. Each of these actions was a step toward fairness and protection. At school, he started paying more attention to how students interacted with each other. He noticed when someone seemed nervous, isolated, or mistreated. He quietly offered support where he could, whether it was a reassuring word, a shared smile, or simply listening. He knew now that even small actions could make a difference, that awareness and presence mattered as much as authority. At home, conversations with his father continued. They talked about fairness, responsibility, and the importance of using one's voice wisely. The teen began to understand the broader implications of what had happened. It wasn't just a personal experience. It was a lesson about community, law, and the importance of accountability. He realized that every action, every choice, and every word could have consequences, and that with awareness came responsibility. The community also took notice. Neighbors who had witnessed the incident shared their experiences with others, spreading awareness about what had happened. Some expressed outrage at the way the teen had been treated, while others praised his composure and the quick action of his father. The teen realized that events like these could inspire conversations, teach lessons, and encourage change. It was a powerful reminder that even difficult experiences could have positive outcomes. In the days that followed, he spent more time reflecting on his own growth. He thought about how fear had felt so overwhelming on that sidewalk, how powerless he had felt in the moment, and how quickly things had changed with the right action. The memory of the handcuffs pressing into his wrists, the rough handling by the officers, and the uncertainty he had felt remained vivid, but it was now balanced by the memory of his father's calm authority, the shift in the officers' behavior, and the support of the community. He began to understand that resilience wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about learning from it, applying what you had learned and using that knowledge to make better choices in the future. He realized that courage and action, even in moments of fear, could protect not only oneself but also others. The experience had changed him, deepening his understanding of fairness, responsibility, and the ways in which authority could be both protective and accountable. The teen also noticed a subtle change in himself. He was more aware of his surroundings, more cautious but not fearful, and more confident in his ability to navigate challenges. He felt a stronger sense of responsibility toward others and a desire to act with fairness and courage. The lessons of the incident had not been easy, but they were lasting. Over time, the formal reviews of the officers concluded. They received warnings, retraining, and were reminded of the importance of proper conduct. The teen's father ensured that the process was thorough, fair, and transparent. It was a reminder that accountability was possible, and that systems could correct themselves when approached with clarity and persistence. The teen continued his daily life, but he carried the experience with him. He was more thoughtful, more aware, and more determined to use his voice wisely. He understood now that fear was temporary, but knowledge, courage, and action were lasting. The lessons he had learned would guide him in school, in the community, and in the choices he made every day. He shared parts of his story quietly with friends who were curious or concerned. He spoke about fear, courage, and the importance of seeking help when needed. He emphasized that staying calm and documenting events could make a big difference. His story inspired others to be more aware, to act responsibly, and to recognize the importance of fairness and accountability. At home, conversations with his father continued to reinforce these lessons. They discussed justice, responsibility, and how to protect oneself while respecting others. The teen began to see how knowledge, preparation, and courage could intersect to create safety and fairness, even in difficult situations. He realized that the incident had given him more than fear and pain. It had given him insight, perspective, and a sense of empowerment that he would carry for the rest of his life. The teen also started noticing how people in his community responded differently after the incident. Some were more careful to pay attention, to intervene when they saw something wrong, or to document events that could have consequences. He realized that awareness and action could ripple outward, creating a culture of accountability and fairness. The incident had not only affected him personally, but had also influenced the larger community in small, meaningful ways. With time, the fear that had gripped him on that sidewalk began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. He still remembered the pain and the uncertainty, but he also remembered the strength he had found, the authority that protected him, and the steps he had taken to ensure his safety. He understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act wisely in its presence. The teen reflected on the day's events often, thinking about the lessons he had learned and the growth he had experienced. He understood that life could change in an instant, that fear could appear suddenly, and that danger could come unexpectedly. But he also understood that with awareness, preparation, and the right support, he could face challenges and protect himself. He carried these lessons into school, into interactions with friends, and into his daily routines. He became more observant, more empathetic, and more thoughtful. He understood that fairness, justice, and courage were not abstract ideas. They were actions, choices, and responsibilities that could shape the world around him. Even as he returned to normal routines, homework, friends, family, he felt a lasting sense of empowerment. The incident had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. He had learned about the importance of calm, the value of guidance, and the impact of accountability. He had experienced fear, courage, and protection in a way that few teenagers do, and he would carry that understanding with him forever. The teen's father continued to guide him, reinforcing the lessons of the incident. They spoke about responsibility, ethics, and the importance of using one's voice. The teen understood that he had not only survived, but had also learned how to navigate difficult situations with intelligence and courage. It was a life lesson that extended far beyond that single afternoon. As the weeks passed, the teen noticed subtle changes in how he viewed the world. He was more aware of injustice, more sensitive to fear and pain in others, and more confident in his own ability to take action when needed. The incident had been a turning point, shaping his perspective, his character, and his understanding of the importance of fairness and responsibility. He realized that while fear and danger were unavoidable parts of life, courage, preparation, and the right guidance could turn even the most frightening experiences into lessons of strength and resilience. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and aggression, and he had emerged not only safe but stronger, wiser, and more aware. The teen also thought about the broader implications of his experience. He understood that his actions, combined with the support of his father and the awareness of the community, had created real change. The officers had been held accountable, procedures had been reinforced, and the incident had sparked conversations about fairness and responsibility. He realized that even one person's courage, supported by authority and observation, could create a ripple effect, influencing the actions of others and shaping the environment in meaningful ways. By the time the months had passed, the teen felt a deep sense of closure. The fear was behind him, the pain had healed, and the lessons had been internalized. He continued his daily life, but with a new perspective, a deeper understanding of justice, and a lasting sense of empowerment. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but he felt prepared, aware, and capable of facing them with courage and wisdom. He had learned that fear could be met with calm, that danger could be countered with strategy, and that support and authority could create safety. He had learned that accountability mattered, that witnesses could make a difference, and that standing up for oneself, even in subtle ways, could protect not only oneself, but others. And as he walked through the neighborhood again, now calm and aware, he carried with him the lessons of the afternoon, the strength he had found, and the understanding that courage, preparation, and fairness could change lives. The experience had been frightening, but it had also been transformative, shaping him into someone more resilient,